not in the middle of the summer. I mean, the weekends.
We have a continuation of a joint public hearing of the Salem City Council held in the council chamber on Thursday, July 20th at 6 p.m. for the purpose of discussing amending an ordinance relative to zoning. The City of Salem zoning map is hereby amended to change the zoning designation for 204, 2016 and 214, I think that's 216, 214, and 222 Derby Street to Central Development, B5. Notice of this hearing was posted on June 20th at 4:06 p.m. From the council, we have absent Councilor Dibble, Councilor Sargent, and Councilor Fury. And in attendance from the administration, we have Planner Tom Daniel, Amanda Chincola, and Ben, I'll ask you to introduce the planning board, please.
Benny Anderson, reader, Andy, on sides, Bill Percent,
Okay, all right, thank you. So, as we said, this is a continuation of a public hearing from earlier, actually the end of June. And I don't know if the petitioner has somebody present, if they'd like to come up and give us a recap and a review, and then if councilors have any questions, we'll see if we can get the council's questions answered, and we'll also have public testimony from people who go around the room, whether you're in favor or opposed, after we've kind of had a discussion. So, thank you. If you can state your name and address.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm Attorney William Quinn from Tinty Quinn, Grover and Fry. The initial hearing was covered by my partner, Scott Grover. He married his youngest son off on Sunday and is AWOL, but this is my project anyway, so I'm here with the clients tonight. I am not here for any developers. My clients I have no contact with and no indication that anything I'm doing tonight has anything to do with any plan for a big project at these Derby Street sites. I'm here for 4 individual property owners who have all owned their property for many decades and kept them up and in as good a condition as they could, given what they had for resources. So that's who I'm here representing, not turning anything over to developers or anything else. These buildings have always, as far as I knew, I grew up in Salem Willows and walked by them myself when I was going to high school. These buildings have always been basically mixed-use buildings. Some sort of business or office on the first floor and some apartments upstairs, and that's what they are now. They're located in an R2 zone. I'm sure you've become more familiar with the building since this started, but every one of them has commercial, either 1 or 2 units on the first floor, and the upstairs are basically used for, to the extent they use, residential apartments. These clients came to me because it's very difficult for them to change commercial tenants. They're right across the street from Pickering Wharf and right on the edge of the B5 district. Anybody at Pickering Wharf, any landlord up and down Derby Street, Central Street, anywhere in the B5 district, to change from one commercial tenant to the other, all they have to do is sign a lease. Okay, the parking is not an issue in the B5 district because the city accepts responsibility, the garages, the street parking, etc. And my clients have to go through a process of filing a special permit application with the Board of Appeals because commercial uses are not allowed in the R2 zone. So if they have an existing commercial use and they want to put in a new tenant, they have to file a special permit and always also a request for parking variance because parking on these sites is either non-existent or minimal because the buildings cover most of the sites. So for example, Mr. Pelletier, they had to do this a couple of years ago to change one of the tenants. I think it was in 2012. He had to go to the Board of Appeals, get a special permit to change a non-conforming use to another, and a parking variance. Fortunately, he got it. But those things aren't always easy to get. They're subject to appeal. And the basic problem is if a tenant wants to come to Salem and they walk down New Derby Street, on one side they've got plenty of vacant space in Pickering Wharf and maybe some on New Derby Street to choose from where they can walk in and sign a lease, Or if they come to us, or we found them and we're trying to land them as a tenant, we have to say, well, we want you, but we have to go to the Board of Appeals, we have to spend thousands of dollars, it's going to take at least 3 months, and we're not sure what the result is going to be. So what do you want to do? It doesn't work for us. It's very difficult to place or compete with tenants when the people across the street can just sign them up. That's the difference between being in the district we're in now and B5. And it's not much different for B1. I was asked to bring, and I did supply some information comparing the uses in B1 and B5. The commercial uses that we want to make are pretty much available in either B1 or B5. But what's not available is the exemption from parking requirements. In B5, just like every other B5 landlord, the city has accepted responsibility to provide parking, and we don't have to provide it for a commercial tenant. For residential tenants in B5, again, like B1 and everywhere else, we do have to provide parking, but at least if the commercial tenants aren't having to park on site, we have, the minimal amount of room we have can be dedicated to residential tenants. So that's the conundrum. We could take a B1, but you would only be doing us half a favor. And that half a favor would be we don't need a special permit anymore to change commercial users, but we still need a parking variance. That's really why we started out thinking of B1 and we changed to B5, because we realized after discussing it that the relief we needed was to get, was a parking problem and a parking issue, and to get rid of the idea that we had to go get special permits for either a user or parking every time they wanted to change a commercial tenant. The people have maintained these buildings in their present, I'd say historically appropriate condition for decades on their own. They haven't needed to be in a historic district, and they're not in a historic district. They're not in the National Register district either. So whenever those districts were set up, these buildings were not included. And when the B5 district was set up, even though it goes right down Hawthorne Boulevard, the middle of Hawthorne Boulevard and Derby Street around Pickering Wharf, these buildings were not included. They should have been, and I wouldn't need to have been here tonight, because they're exactly used the same way the properties at Pickering Wharf are all used. Commercial and upstairs residential. That's why we're here. We're seeking your help to get a zoning change, not to build a skyscraper, but to be able to change tenants without having to go to the Board of Appeals. I provided, this complicated zoning applies generally to all these properties, and when you're talking about 3 districts, it's 3 times as complicated. But the gist of it is, no significant development can take place on any of these 4 lots without needing Board of Appeals approval. That's just life in Salem under our existing zoning on tiny lots like these people have. Every one of these lots is under 4,000 square feet. Altogether, they total about 9,600 square feet, and they're divided by a street in the middle, so they're really not all adjacent. 2 are on one side of a street and 2 are on the other side. So the issue of whether or not these buildings will ever be 70 feet high, or they'll have 25 or 50 units upstairs, it won't happen unless somebody can get the Board of Appeals to give them all the variances that they need to do that. And those would probably be lot coverage ratio, lot coverage, lot area per dwelling unit, and parking. And anybody that's been involved, as long as most of us have, knows that the Board of Appeals is not generous with variances these days. And I don't criticize them for it. That's sort of the last resort in terms of the city protecting itself from overdevelopment or overzealous planning. But that's what would happen if any of these owners get your approval of a B5 district. They won't have to provide parking for the first floor tenants. They can change tenants, but as soon as they want to start adding apartments upstairs, whether it's in the building or above the building, put on a story or whatever, they're going to have to go to the Board of Appeals, and it'll either be approved or not. If the Board of Appeals denied it, they'll have virtually no legal likelihood of overruling the Board of Appeals. So this is not a situation of risk for overdevelopment or high-rise development on Derby Street. There's no hidden agenda, but the bottom line is you're protected by the zoning regulations that apply to these lots. And I've heard 2 other arguments recently I'd just like to quickly address. One is that because the Archdiocese property, which is over an acre, the vacant I don't know if it's vacant anymore, the school building and the church and the parking lot abut the rear of a couple of these properties. That property is zoned presently R2. That property isn't going to be developed by anybody, my clients or the church, without getting either probably zoning relief or rezoning for that property. Right now, it's an exempt religious use. That's exempt in an R2 district, in all of our districts. So it's a conforming use. So if they want to go in and try and build something big there, they can't go in for a special permit to change from one non-conforming use to another. They can't get a use variance because those are not allowed under Salem zoning. And I checked again today, a PUD is not available in the R2 district, prohibited. So that property's never going to be developed unless they keep doing what they're doing there, or they come in for a rezoning of their own. And if they did that, and you saw fit to grant it, probably the last thing they'd need would be our two little buildings adjacent to it that give them, 6,000 square feet covered by a couple of brick buildings. What they need is a rezoning of their 1.6 acres so they can do something with it. So that is not likely at all. And the second thing is, there's been discussion about somehow giving my clients a B5 zoning district will allow a rolling down Derby Street of commercial zoning. I mean, that is so unlikely. There are a couple of houses on the same side of Derby Street, and then the whole National Park District property, the Custom House and its adjacent properties on one side. Across the street is Pickering Wharf, which is already B5, and then the rest of the National Park. The wharfs, the ship, the park, all of that. So there's no place for us to really roll anything if that were our intention, and it's not our intention. The last thing I'd say is, we have to ask for a change of district. The fact that the B5 district has a maximum height of 70 feet in no way means we're going to build or would be able to build to 70 feet. Every building that's in the B5 district now, up and down New Derby Street, Central Street, Upper Derby Street, Lafayette Street, all of that has the maximum height in that district for each of those properties is 70 feet. But there hasn't been any spate of applications coming in to build high-rise buildings on all those lots, and the reason is you have to meet the zoning in all other ways. You have to have enough parking. You have to have the right lot area. You have to have a ratio between the lot and the building that meets current standards, or you have to go to the Board of Appeals for all those variances. So we're not asking for anything that isn't already prevalent in basically all of downtown Salem. We think it's somewhat unfair that we were left out in the first place, and we're trying to fix that, and we're asking your assistance. You know, if you really want to preserve these buildings, which is what I'd say to those that think preservation is, I think it's an important issue. And it is. But if you really want to help us preserve these buildings, put us on a level playing field so we can make enough income to maintain the buildings. Okay? Don't keep us in a position where every time we're trying to get a tenant, they end up going somewhere else because we have complications and delays that they don't want to put up with. So that's my response to what's been happening, a summary of where we are. I'm here with two of the clients over here, and we're happy to answer any questions you have or respond after you get further public comments.
Thank you. Any counselors? Counselor Famico.
Thank you, Madam President. Through you, I guess to the attorney.
Oh, I'm sorry, sure.
I'm going to stay up there for a little bit.
That one commercial use had changed over a few years ago. If we're looking at the last 20 years, how many of those commercial spaces have changed over?
I don't know, but I do know that the people that run those businesses are getting older. I really don't know. But again, it's not unusual to expect that commercial tenants are going to come and go.
Right. Well, just in general, I've seen the same part there. And then secondly, I don't know if it would be to you or the city planner. Would, if this became B5 and the upstairs maintained as residential, would that be considered a new residential dwelling use because it's now B5?
I can try that.
And then if they add on new dwellings, then there actually is a requirement for parking.
Yeah, there's always a parking requirement for residences even in B5. It's only that in existing buildings, it can be one space per unit, and for any new construction, it's 1.5 spaces per unit. You agree?
Yes.
Okay, but again, we aren't complying with it now. We're non-conforming. We've been non-conforming so long. We can keep it exactly as it is, but as soon as we wanted to change it, if we wanted to subdivide an upper floor into more apartments, or put an addition on the top of the building or on the side of the building if we had any room to do it, it would trigger the regular parking requirements of 1 per existing unit and 1.5 for each new unit we were putting into service.
I'd like to know the turnover rate of the commercial tenants the last 20 years prior to this coming back to the council.
Again, isn't that the first question we
No,
talked
just
about?
but I'm going back to it, but I'm saying prior to it coming back to the council, if we could have that information.
I'm sorry, I just don't understand the question.
You didn't have the answer, so if this goes to the planning board for them to
Yep.
make a decision and it comes back to us?
Sure.
If you could have
Get
the
you more information about that. But I still think it's kind of unfair to assume that because they had some stable tenants in the past, they aren't going to need to have new tenants over the years.
Councilor Terrio.
Thank you, Madam President. Through you, I don't have an inherent problem with the B5. I understand the uses of it and the purpose. The concern that I have about taking properties like this and making them in the B5 is through most of the B5 in the city, we have the extra protections of having the SRA oversight and having any changes having to go through the design review board as well. And if we just change the zoning, we are putting that zoning in place, but we're not putting in that additional layer of protection against changes that could be harmful to the buildings. I understand that these aren't likely, because of lot requirements and parking requirements, these aren't likely to be built up. But still, significant changes are, I would think, more likely to be put on the buildings of whatever sort, because in the B5 zone, because a change of tenant could involve some serious exterior changes, and without that DRB and SRA review, that you could be in a situation where a new tenant could proceed with kind of a wholesale makeover of the building. That would really change the character of the neighborhood. So that's where my concern on this comes in line. If we added these properties to that SRA district, I think I'd be more supportive of it at that point, but that's really the part that's a sticky point for me right now.
Can I just respond quickly? I mean, I totally understand and agree with your concern. We didn't decide whether we're in a historic district or not, or whether we're in the urban renewal district or not, or whether we're in the B5 or not, except now we're trying to get our dibs in on that. Any construction on these buildings that triggers site plan review will put them under site plan review. And since they have several residential units you get the bungholes of special cases, a tiny building, 1 story, it's on 800 and something square feet, nothing's going to happen there. It's too little. The other 3 buildings, if anything significant is built onto them, they're going to be subject to, if they contain more than a total of 6 residential units when we're supposed to be done, we're going to have to go through site plan review. And we don't have an objection to design review of these buildings. We really don't. The problem is, it isn't something we can just volunteer for. There's statutory apparatus in place as to where their authority is and when they can make decisions. If the city decided to expand the urban renewal district to include these buildings, we'd be happy. Okay, and we would subject ourselves then to the requirements of design review. And it's possible that discussion could continue with the planning board if you refer this to the planning board. But, the bottom line again really is, the city hasn't needed, so far anyway, to oversight these buildings because the owners do that. And that's how we expect it to go as long as at least these people are the owners. So there's time to address that additional concern, and it's not really a problem for us. However, my clients don't want, at my rates, to pay me to rally a change in the urban renewal district and take the burden on to them privately to do that. That's something the city would have to do, and we'd cooperate or assist.
Councilor McCarthy.
Thank you, Madam President. Through Tom, As a follow-up to that, what would it take to expand the urban renewal district to include these buildings?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilor McCarthy, to amend the boundary would be considered a major, there's two types of amendments to the urban renewal plan. One is a minor modification, one is a major. I checked with the state to see what this would, if this would trigger major, and it would. So what that means is there would be a public process, there need to be discussion publicly. We need to have approval by the redevelopment authority, the planning board, and the city council. Then that would go to the state for approval. The state has 60 days to review that piece.
Okay, so there is a process in place, and assuming that if we want the protections, as was just brought up, and that I was going to bring up anyway, but then it was brought beforehand, which is fine. If we want those protections, then there is a process in place.
And may I just add one? In addition to design review, one of the features of being within the urban renewal area is the redevelopment authority has the power to prevent demolition, which is a unique power. So that's another
Safeguard.
Another safeguard.
Councilor Replik.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tom, if you could stay there for just a second. I think that expansion of the SRA district in general, I'm not talking about B5, but SRA protections in general, would be a good discussion for the planning department to have about not just these particular locations, but perhaps even including the church and the school as part of that. And if there are other parts of town, parts of the city that are close to the current downtown that the administration thinks would behoove the city to have these extra protections of the SRA, that this would be the time perhaps to ask for those requests, to have it in all one fell swoop. And I would agree with the good Ward 5 councilor that if we do approve Ward 5, if we do approve a B5 for this particular applicant, that there do need to be the SRA protections in place.
Councilor McCarthy.
Before Mr. Daniels leaves us, very quickly, I mean, with the map that was provided to us earlier, could you basically just run down the different zones that are currently on Derby Street?
Sure, can I grab it?
Yeah, you can grab a map, because, I mean, obviously there are a bunch of zones on the map, and they're all colored, but just to make sure everyone understands what color goes with what.
Sure. I'm not sure which map you have, but I'll point to this. So everything in gray is the B5. The red boundary is the urban renewal area. And where we're talking about this little spot here is Hawthorne Boulevard with the triangle. And so all of this orange color is R2. So the properties along Derby Street here are R2 on the north side of Derby. On the south side is gray, where you have Pickering Wharf, but that area is outside of the urban renewal area.
And could you describe what goes on up Derby Street as we head
As you head further east,
north, east?
as you out
There you go.
out from downtown, so that continues to be the R2, and then there is some B1 out there as you get, I can't remember the street where the B1 picks up.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Famico?
Hold on a second. Sure. Through you. If though this was changed and project were started though, even before SRA got changed, would it be tied into the current regulations for the SRA?
I'm sorry, if
So
the
say they were-
rezoning happened first?
Say if the zoning took place and it got changed, and then a permit was pulled or a plan put forward, would it be grandfathered into the current, even though if you're looking to change SRA, it would then, whatever is currently in place? Is that correct?
So
the SRA
I would
district?
want to confirm with the city solicitor, but if the zoning were changed, but the urban renewal area had not been changed, so you have that time that whatever permit was applied for at that time would be subject to the regulations, so it would not be subject to the SRA's review.
If you end up bringing up the SRA, I'd love to see things like the definition of those small site plans or the site reviews and everything as part of that as well. Thank you.
Any other councils? Planning board? No?
Sir, a question for Attorney Quinn. Can you please, again, say why the B1 is not preferable to the B5?
Because
You
the B-
mentioned that at the outset, and I
Yeah.
just wanted to...
The
hear that again.
B1 does not include the use of municipal parking facilities to satisfy the commercial tenants. The only zone that allows that is B5. So if we would change to B1, even though it seems like an improvement, and it would be, like I said, half an improvement. Instead of getting two things from the Board of Appeals, a special permit to convert and a parking variance, we need one, a parking variance. And a variance is the hardest thing to uphold on appeal. I think in recent years, it's fair to say the Board of Appeals has been more strict in its review of requests for parking variances, as parking is tightened up in the city, generally speaking. So that's why going to a B1 really doesn't do us a great favor, or benefit us to the extent that we'd like, so we can be competitive, which is have commercial tenants park in municipal facilities without providing on-site parking for commercial. Is that
Anyone else? Counselor Dibble, then Counselor Terrio.
Thank you, Madam President. While you're up there, good to see you, Attorney.
Thank you.
You talked about the special permits and the inconvenience of it.
I say more of a burden, not an inconvenience.
A burden, okay. The good Ward 2 councilors talked about have the business changed over the years, and yes, they had. I had my wedding reception in there in Tammany Hall, my wedding reception
Yeah.
dinner rehearsal, rather. So it's changed, but that was 28 years ago. The bunghole's been there for longer than I can remember.
My father used to go there to cut on his way home.
Betsy Mary and Dan Fox's office looks wonderful, and it's been there for a few years, and Tachet's Realty and the Pyramid Bookstore has been there for a long time, so you might have difficulty finding so many changes over the last couple of decades.
No, I'm real happy it's been stable, but that doesn't mean it's going to continue to be such.
So I'm wondering how difficult it's been when the business tenants haven't changed. But you mentioned tenants. Were you just speaking of business tenants, or is there a problem with the residential tenants when they change?
I'm not comparing us on a residential level with any harder or easier than anybody else trying to rent apartments.
So just the business tenants were
Commercial. But of course, that's the engine that runs the building, basically. They only have a couple of apartments each right now, so the income from the first floor, or the one or two tenants in a couple of these buildings on the first floor is the major source of income for the building.
Okay, so if it's not the residential tenants, then we're talking business tenants, and the 4 or 5 of them really haven't changed that much at all in the last couple of decades.
Well, again, I don't know without going back and talking to all the owners to get a list of what's changed, but I just think it isn't fair to say, well, you've had some great tenants over the years, good luck, we hope it holds up. But it might not hold up.
Okay, well, I don't see how it's been a burden or been an inconvenience, whichever word you used earlier, when it really hasn't changed for
As I
decades.
said, one of the tenants a couple of years ago had to go through this at the Board of Appeals. That's our primary example, but I think you can find that the building inspector and the town planner, city planner will agree that any change in commercial tenants that we do incur will require those permits.
Through our president, if we were to switch to B1, then the residences become non-conforming, and that might be more of a burden along the way.
Yeah, that's actually not true. B1, you can have residences in B1.
I believe from the chart, and I'll ask our planner
Let's
to
look
confirm
at it
that.
together and see if I'm right.
I thought from the...
Residential uses, yeah, dwelling single under B1, yes. Dwelling two-family, yes. Dwelling multifamily, yes.
Under B1, so
Yeah.
that's not a problem then.
It is right now because we're in R2, and that's illegal in R2, as is a mixed-use building. That's why we're trying to get out of it.
Well, it's not illegal. Having the businesses there in the R2 is just non-conforming.
It's a legal non-conforming
They're
use,
legal.
right.
So saying it's illegal is improper wording.
Okay, I agree. I agree.
It's a legal use. Both the
It's a
businesses...
legal non-conforming use, to
Correct.
be exact.
But it's legal. They
As long
are...
as it lasts, it's legal, yep.
Yep. The uses on the first floor of business and the uses of second and third floor of residences are all legal.
Well, what's legal on the first floor is a bookstore in one, a real estate office in another, a real estate office in another. I don't remember all the tenants. But you can't change from a bookstore to a law office or a dental office without getting a special permit. You could, if you were lucky enough to find another bookstore to replace Pyramid Books. I think, without speaking for him, the building inspector would consider that not a change of use and not requiring a special permit. But how luckily,
I'm wondering, again, through our president, have many applicants been denied? That business applicants been denied that right to switch from one
Board
business to
of
another?
Appeals, again, I can't speak for the Board of Appeals without doing
I'm talking
history on it.
historically.
No, in our building or generally?
In the 4 properties.
I only know of one instance since 2013, and they were approved. But as I said, again, variances are hard to uphold legally, and the city is, I think, well recognized as tightening up on giving variances for any reason. So that's my experience, and that's what I do for a living here. So,
Thank you. Through our president to our planner, please.
Sure.
thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Hi, good to see you. Thanks.
Fast question on the urban renewal area, the Heritage Plaza East. As, again, from a planner from the 1980s here at Salem City Hall in my previous life, 2 previous lives ago, as I understand it, we can't create an island to the Heritage Plaza East or West zones because it can't stand alone. It has to be contiguous. Is that correct?
Yes, and just to update, so in 2011, when we updated the urban renewal plan, those Heritage Plaza East and West merged into one, so those no longer exist.
Showing my age.
And that's okay. And so the boundary, you're right, you would not have a freestanding island. We would need to amend this to pick up the triangle, that traffic island at Hawthorne Boulevard, and extend it over. So there'd be an arm, or a peninsula sort of extension over here.
That's the Father Matthew Triangle.
Okay.
It's a whole nother story. That's a good story. I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Terrio.
Thank you, Madam President, through you. So just, I know, like in looking through this, I know at least 3 of the buildings are owner-occupied as far as the businesses that are on that first floor. Louise has half of it and then rents out the other part of it to Betsy and Dan. And then Bunghole is owned, by, and the Taché family operates, their first floor. So there wouldn't be an issue there as long as they continue the businesses. The question that I have is related to the B1 and the parking. As a couple people mentioned, the B1 continues once you go up Derby Street a ways, and it covers several existing blocks. And I know a change of tenant, you're saying, or change of a tenant would trigger that ZBA review. And we just had one of those pretty recently in that B1, and as far as I know, there was no parking requirement trigger when Pig's Eye was replaced by Mercy Tavern. That was a new business, still continuing restaurant use, but it was a different tenant, different liquor license, different business name, different incorporation and all that, but there was no review. And there was no parking when it was Pig's Eye, and there's no parking now that it's Mercy Tavern, but I didn't see that as necessarily being an issue worthy of the ZBA at that point. So from the parking review standpoint, if things like that can happen, and nobody had any issue with that at the time, then I don't know that the B1 parking would be an issue here, so long as it's one business use continuing to another business use.
I think the applicant has spoken to the experience of needing to get that parking, that being a challenge. I can't speak to the,
Nobody made that happen when it was, when that change of use happened in the B1 right up the street, so.
so it's, I would want to confer with the zoning officer on that.
Please.
Again, I'm not familiar with that particular application, I wasn't involved in that, but I think you'll find, if you talk to the building inspector, one restaurant and another, it's the same use. It doesn't matter if they belong to the same people or not. There's no change of use. If there's no change of use, it doesn't trigger a review of anything unless the building's expanding.
Okay.
Right, but bookstore to restaurant, restaurant to dental office to whatever, personal service business or whatever, those are definitely changes of use and they all trigger a requirement, you comply with the current parking regulations.
But for instance, let's use Pyramid as the example there. So that's a bookstore, that's a retail use. So would likely from a enforcement standpoint, would it transition to another retail use then? Or Taché or, for instance, Mary Fox, those are both real estate offices. Those are both, services offices. So if another office went in there, another office use, would that be? So the question is, where does that, what change triggers that?
Right, well, I believe it would because different types of commercial uses have different parking requirements. For example, for a dental office, you've got to have 2 spaces for each professional, 1/2 space for each employee. So you get 2 dentists and 2 employees, you need 7 people. If you have a retail store, you need 1 per 150 square feet of retail space. So the calculations are different, and if the calculations are going to be different, because the businesses are different, I'm sure that you'll find that Tom St. Pierre will confirm that that would trigger in his mind. He won't give an occupancy permit until you get a variance to address the parking needs, which are different. But if it's the same exact use, if it's a restaurant in the same space, again, he has some discretion, and I don't know when he exercises it or not, but I think he probably would agree that a restaurant can replace a restaurant because the parking calculation would be the same and would not then trigger a review of parking. So that sounds like the situation we're talking about. Restaurant replaced restaurant. So probably no parking review because of exact same use with the same type of parking calculation replaced the former one. So, but again, I can't speak to the building inspector, but that's my experience.
Councilor Famico, then I want to open it up for public comment too, and we can always have other questions from the councilors or from the planning board afterwards, but I know you folks have been sitting very patiently, and I want to make sure that you have your opportunity. So, Councilor Famico?
Thanks. First a comment, then final question. The comment is, in general, I think this parking requirement with municipal lots and garages needs to go. In the case of this property, it's across the street from South Harbor Garage. Every year now that we have those reserved spots, the lottery, that one, there's actually a waiting list for the reserved spots in the South Harbor Garage. It's full a lot of days, and the street spots in that area are full. And when we're making it a requirement, it goes on people's deeds long-term, and it's really affecting a lot in general. So I'd like to see that reviewed, and I know it's in the queue. The second thing is, during our last meeting, we spoke about having notice to the abutters sent out, specifically the folks in the Waterfront Hotel and elsewhere. Did that take place?
Yeah, I believe
great.
Councilor McCarthy can.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to open it up for public comment. What we're going to do is we'll start on this side of the room. We'll ask folks who are in favor of this petition to come up and speak. We'll go all the way around, and then we'll start rounding again for those who are not in favor. So, anybody in favor over here? How about on this side? No? Okay, all right. How about anyone who's opposed to the petition? We'll start back over here. No? Okay. If you could come up, state your name and address, please.
Hi, Jennifer Firth, President of Historic Salem. Thank you for letting me speak. I think we all know what the issues are, and you know that we don't support the rezoning to B5 because it just creates too much of a risk in this neighborhood. It's a beautiful historic neighborhood, and the risk of a potential tear down or a zoning rollout is just too high. And I appreciate the councilors tonight all putting risk management hats on because all your questions were really well received, I think, by a lot of people here, and we appreciate that scrutiny you're giving this. The B1, the counselor's argument against rezoning to B1, I feel is disingenuous because I think there's a transparency when you have to go to ZBA for a special permit or for a variance. That process allows people to come to the ZBA and give opinions and look at the plans and understand what's going on in their own neighborhood. And to try to rezone to a zoning B5 that's not appropriate just to get around going to the ZBA and having that transparency is not a good place to be. So I've had to go to the ZBA when I put a room on my house. I called them, they put me on an agenda. In 3 weeks, I was on the agenda and I had my approval. And during that process, all of my neighbors got to weigh in on what I was doing. That's how government works. I agree with, I think Heather said that B1 and the parking requirement needs to be rethought, and I think we all agree with that. But that's not appropriate for the city. It's something I would recommend that maybe the council talks to the planning board about, because we would like to see people walking. I think having a parking requirement is detrimental to businesses that want to be in tight areas like that, and I think it's time for that zoning to be rethought. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on this side of the room? How about on this side? Anyone like to speak opposed? Yes, sir, come on up. If we can have your name and address, please.
My name is Victor Garber. I live on Union Street. My question is, does the change from R2 to B5 open up uses such as a marijuana shop? Whereas the R2 would prevent that? Thinking a little bit ahead here.
Can you speak to that?
Thank you.
So regarding that specific use, that's something that we're reviewing what the changes will be with the updated legislation and how we'll identify the location, which zones that use would be permitted in.
Thank you. Did you hear that, sir?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I just add to that, please?
Sure, come on up.
I believe that all locations would have to be approved by the city and the state for, at least under the present law. So I don't think any commercial use in any part of downtown Salem can just open up a marijuana shop or lease it out to them. I think the whole slew of regulatory apparatus that you have to get through to get a location. So, and I don't think this zone is any more subject to it than any other commercial zone.
Councilor Rupley?
Just a quick comment.
Yeah.
I believe, and anyone can correct me on this, but I believe that under all proposals for marijuana shops, that you can't be close to a house of worship. So I think that probably solves that for these particular units.
Thank you. Would anyone else over here like to speak opposed to the project? Do any of the councilors or the planning board have any more questions? Seeing none, Councilor McCarthy?
So I don't have to stand. I guess as the planning board just takes this and then refers back, I guess the issues that obviously came up are zone and which zone. I mean, obviously, Attorney Quinn did a very nice job presenting his client's side. I mean, I think we raised a lot of questions relative to protections. I think the protections are probably the biggest part of this as we move forward and how we get to that point. And I don't know if they have to happen concurrently or what, so I would be once we refer it out, is what your recommendations back are, is what we should be looking at. I mean, obviously, I think there's the point brought up about the B1 zone, if that's the recommendation would be, then obviously, then I think we should really have a hard look at repealing the parking requirement in the B1 zone. So that would just make the playing field level across the board, as was brought up. But those are conversations for another day. But if there's no further discussions.
Councilor Dibble?
Thank you, Madam
Well,
President.
we'll let Councilor McCarthy, were you going to make a motion?
I was going to do what I'm supposed to do, but Council Dibble has something to say.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam President. Fast comment, if I may. We have the B5, a lot of activity. Then we go to Pickering Wharf, we have some B1 activities down Derby Street, and I see that as a nice transition from the downtown to a nice residential neighborhood along Derby Street. And to possibly change these 4 very nice buildings, and I agree with the Ward 1 Council that Attorney Quinn did a nice job for his customers today, his clients. But if we go from the downtown to Pickering Wharf and a couple of small mom and pop type stores along that, and that's what the B1 is supposed to be, mom and pop type stores, we go from a nice transition to a wonderful neighborhood in along Derby Street. I would hate to see that change along the way over the years. The buildings, the 4 buildings, the 4 properties are beautiful. I've walked them recently, and I've looked at them for years, for decades. It's a nice balance. So I'd be inclined, because there's very little change in the ownership of the businesses, so I don't see it as a hardship or inconvenience or burden or whatever you want to call it, to have them come before the Board of Appeals to make a change. So I'd be inclined to, nothing's been wrong for decades, so we're almost in search of a problem that doesn't exist. Everything's been good. It looks good, it services the businesses, they've been longtime tenants, housing up above, so I'd be inclined to see it, unless things change, to see it stay as R2. I think it works.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Council McCarthy.
Seeing no further discussion?
I would just a little bit. I agree on that.
Council Sergeant?
I just worry about the proximity to the residential neighborhood on the B5. B1 is usually next to residential neighborhoods, and it's business that serves the neighborhood. Business that, the corner variety stores and those kind of things. It's not too often, I don't know of any case where you see B5 so close to residential property. So, I just see the B5 as adding value to the commercial properties and really taking away from the residential properties. Because it's like 5 feet away in some cases. So, maybe that it was put in place to have whatever change happens, have the scrutiny of being non-conforming, so that the neighborhood would have their protection. With the B5, we don't have that. So, that's it, I yield. Thank you.
Council McCarthy, 3rd time's a charm.
Thank you, members. I move the public hearing be closed.
Council McCarthy moves that the public hearing be closed, seconded by, it came from over here. Okay, Council Repley, all those in favor? All those opposed? Hearing's closed. Council McCarthy?
Further move that the matter be referred to the planning board for their recommendation. Second.
Okay, Councilor McCarthy moves that this be referred to the planning board, seconded by Councilor Repley. All those in favor? All those opposed? Matter carries. Councilor McCarthy, Councilor McCarthy, might as well.
Move we adjourn.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, we are adjourned.